All right. I think we are live. I'm going to assume we are. September 8th, the year of our Lord 2024. Zubin here. Today we're going to talk about awakening stuff and a particular part of that journey that we talk about occasionally, but I think it's really given short shrift and it's so crucial because if this work doesn't arise, and you don't dive into unconscious conditioning, weird shit starts to happen. And that's when you start hearing the stories about all these, apparently enlightened people that are behaving like total ass clowns, sleeping with students, abusing students, being like, projecting this image that they're this, super enlightened, awakened, no self, and then behaving like total assholes to their loved ones. So what's going on, right? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So the first thing, a little bit of housekeeping. We're live right now, but we will be on the replay. If you can please leave a comment on YouTube or whatever platform you're watching on. I want to hear from you. I read all the comments. So if you have a particular experience with this unconscious material or something you want to share, it's invaluable to the rest of the group. The second thing is, if you guys are interested in this whole awakening journey, which is so paradoxical because nobody wakes up and it's not a journey, but yet it is experienced as that, you may want to consider joining our supporter tribe. It's like $5 a month on YouTube or Facebook or Locals or Instagram, wherever you want to do it. And you get access to live conversations that we have fairly frequently, and Zoom meetings that are kind of groups where we share our own experience. And those are very powerful. Like, the more we do them, the more I'm just like, wow, what even just happened there? It's incredible. Nobody's teaching. We're all kind of holding space for each other. It's really beautiful. Okay, that all said. A few months ago, I think 3 months ago, and I linked to it in the description here, I did a video, and I see everybody live here. Hi, Bob, Sarah, all the people. I did a video on the different threads of awakening, and this is based on the work of Pierce Salguero, who's a professor of Asian medicine, actually, and medical humanities, I think, at Penn State. Incredibly brilliant guy. And I've seen a couple of his lectures that were in these sort of private groups, kind of like the one I'm talking about with our supporter tribe, where it's small groups talking about this stuff. And he outlined this really beautiful map of how awakening might unfold. And the map is never the territory. It's never exactly what's going on. It's another way of looking at things. So the Buddhists have a map, the Christians have a map, scientists have a map. They all are trying to describe reality from different angles, and they all have pros and cons. But Pierce's map was, well, what if awakening, this idea that we progressively kind of wake up to what our true nature is and progressively see more clearly what is actually happening, and the nature of our identity and so on and so forth. And we've talked about awakening a million times, and it's also impossible to talk about. So that's the paradox. But what if, like, the traditional maps of this, where often we talk about stages, like you have this first awakening where you maybe feel like you're just consciousness, and then there's shadow work that's done, and then there's this kind of second reality of like no self, and it happens in these kind of stages. Maybe that's not a useful map for everyone. Maybe a more useful map might be these threads of awakening, where there are different facets to the diamond of reality, and they show up at different times, sometimes interpenetrating and co-overlapping, and other times not. And each thread has a particular theme and aspect of reality that is showing up that, if you take it to the completion of the thread, would be one sort of solid unraveling of truth. But there are multiple threads. So there might be a thread of emptiness, you might call it, where the fundamental realization becomes clearer and clearer that all of this stuff we're calling reality is not what you think. It's actually empty of any real substance. It's not real in the sense that we think we can grab it and hold it. That's all an illusion. And it's radiating out of a pure potentiality that is the substrate of reality. So that's one thread. And the Buddhists really kind of emphasize this thread, that you can just fall into this emptiness where everything is seen to be radically impermanent, completely empty of self, empty of substance, empty of even existence, empty of perception. It's just exactly what it is and isn't, and it's impossible to talk about it, but it can be realized. So that's one thread. And a central question in that thread might be, oh, what still feels real to me? And then explore that through inquiry and see that maybe it's actually not so real as we thought. So that's one thread. Another thread might be this thread of unity, of divinity, of everything is God, of one love, like infinite love. And the Christians tend to emphasize this thread, this sort of, the love of Christ, or in the Judeo-Christian idea that God's love. So that can be felt as an increasing lack of separation between what you think you are and the entirety of manifestation. And it can feel like a divine kind of love, or a falling into God, or there's a million ways to see it. But that particular thread can show up. And that one, the central question might be, what still feels separate? What still makes me feel like I'm apart? And as you explore that, those things can start to collapse, right? And then another thread might be the energy thread, where it's increasingly experienced that nothing is static, nothing is stationary, everything is vibrating energy. And that can be felt in and as the body, as just pure energy. It can be felt in the environment as everything is just vibrating, condensed energy. And the question there can be, what still feels static? What still feels stable? And you can explore, and that can open up. And things in that space are things like yoga, Kundalini, sort of the chakra energies. These are different maps and models and ideas that conceptualize something that is more experiential, which is that everything feels like energy. So those are three of the four main threads that Pierce talks about in his work. But the fourth is what I want to talk about today. And this one is, I recently saw a talk with him, and it just really hit home because it's been showing up for me. So in the past, I've had the emptiness thread has shown up, like on retreat, like, wow, everything is completely radiant, empty brilliance. And the love thread has shown up. Oh my God, this like infinite connection to all that is. Okay, great. Energy shows up, these currents of energy, and everything is just vibrating. That's all great and beautiful. And each thread can be taken to its completion. And I'm still on that unfolding. But the unconscious thread, what does that mean? And this is one that, boy, it's an uncomfortable one. And when it shows up, it can be associated with existential dread, weirdness, repressed memories coming up, feelings of trauma and re-trauma, and just a real kind of unsettling aspect to it, and also a beauty. And all of that is normal. All of that is part of this thread. So what is this thread? This thread is the how do I say this? It's the seeing what previously was unseen. That is, operating in the background always and already and eternally, and conditions every moment. So when you find yourself snapping at the neighbor, or yelling at your kids, or engaging in patterns of behavior, that is the sum total of all the unconscious, meaning parts of reality that are not apparent to your awareness in that moment. All that unconscious conditioning is determining that moment. So what is unconscious conditioning? Well, it's kind of like an onion that you keep peeling and peeling and peeling, and it has multiple layers. So one layer of the unconscious might be, and by the way, what does this have to do with awakening? Every single fucking thing. Because if everything that incorporates this moment as it shows up, your behavior, all of the way that you show up in the world, the way you see yourself, is the sum total of all your conditioning, and you don't see that conditioning consciously, well, you're going to continue to behave in unconscious ways, which means there's asleepness, for lack of a better term. You're going through the motions and not knowingly doing that. Now, it may be that you have no control over your conditioning, right? But you do have control over resistance to your conditioning. So there's an aspect where We repress parts of what make us up. We deny, we project, and it shows up in the world as truly dysfunctional behavior. So probably every war, every conflict, every sense of separation, every thing that you can imagine is hurtful is the sum total of this unconscious repression that's showing up in the world and projecting out in behavior. And until we're able to see it, and then one of three things happen to it. We heal it in a way, we resolve it. So if it's some conflict that needs resolution but it hasn't been seen, well, that is resolvable, that is healable, that is purgeable, that is solvable. But you got to do that work. It has to arise, it has to be seen, it has to be dealt with. So maybe that's therapy, maybe that's internal family systems, which we can talk about, maybe that's EMDR for PTSD, maybe that's a lot of different approaches can dive into healing and resolving unconscious material. But then there's some unconscious material that's not necessarily resolvable. It's part of who we are. And if you go through the onion, you could say, well, the top of the onion is just our biographical story, our personal story, like how we were raised, what happened to us in life. Did we have particular traumas and particular experiences, particular education, particular church we went to, particular parents, particular siblings? All of that set up our biographical story. And that's only the top of the onion. But that determines so much of how we are. And it's unconscious most of the time because it has conditioned our experience through everything from simple learning to unconscious conditioning, like Pavlovian conditioning, to more subtle forms of conditioning. And, that in itself is just the superficial layer of our conditioning. And yet it drives so much. So again, you can access that through things like, therapy, a million different ways to get at that. But that's even only part of it. Because then you even have layers of the unconscious that are, and I'm sorry if this is a little disjointed, it just kind of comes as it comes. I don't really lecture very well, if I ever did anymore. There's even prenatal and preverbal conditioning. So we all know that, there's data that mothers who are pregnant when they're stressed, when they're in conflict, if they're using substances, if they have poor nutrition, that affects the fetus. And that's prenatal conditioning, but it's part of our story. It's part of our conditioning, but it's not accessible at the obvious conscious level, but it can arise. It can be actually experienced. But what we often will do is either repress, deny, or not see it, and then it shows up in our behavior in ways that are totally unconscious, and then we're perplexed why we behave the way we do. And even though there's probably, it's clear there's not a free will component here, this is all the conditioning playing out. There is an aspect of our conditioning that tries to resist, repress, deny, and that's what can be seen even and opened up. So you can resolve certain aspects of conditioning, but we were talking about the unresolvable conditioning. Well, prenatal conditioning, etc., preverbal conditioning, trauma before we had access to speech, so we couldn't really make sense of it, we couldn't talk about it, but it's there in the body. Well, can you resolve that trauma? Or maybe it's just about welcoming it. Maybe it's about knowing that that was there and now understanding, oh, this is why I overeat, because when I was very young, there was a deprivation aspect that was conditioned very early. And now food is a kind of a safety mechanism, whatever it is, right? Whatever your conditioning is. And by seeing it, by making that dark component of you, and by dark, I don't mean evil or anything like that, although that's an archetypal conditioning, isn't it? That we associate darkness with evil is a human archetypal conditioning. That's another deeper level of the unconscious. We'll talk about that maybe. So still here at this preverbal level, you might just notice that this dark stuff, meaning it hasn't been brought into awareness, it hasn't been enlightened. You don't get enlightenment by focusing on light, as Carl Jung said. You get enlightened by lighting up the dark spaces with consciousness so that they're seen, right? So maybe there's work that you do with psychedelics or with a therapist or with meditation or with different rituals, shamanic rituals, where you can access preverbal trauma And I've done this recently, and it is powerful, powerful, powerful. So you have the stuff you can resolve. You have the stuff you need to just allow and welcome and say, okay, I'm no longer repressing, denying, or avoiding this. I'm just going to see it fully for what it is. And that will, in a sense, set me free because I'm no longer a slave to this unconscious material that's controlling my behavior in a passive, aggressive, or unconscious way. And then the third sort of bucket of the unconscious that you can sort of act on, in a sense, if there's really action, is liberating the unconscious. So this is where you may have an internal part of you that was an early conditioning, an early child that was exiled in a sense. So sort of set away, said, you know what, I don't want to hear your voice right now. It's not good. It's not safe. Whatever. It's not good enough. It hurts in some way. And that child's voice is then silenced, but the kid lives there. And this is what happens with the unconscious. This is why the unconscious is so crucial. By the way, Marianne says, I spent the last 2 days crying. Why? Why would that be? Almost always that's the unconscious coming up and expressing. In a way, that's the perfect comment for what we're talking about. There is this part that has never been allowed to express. And when it does, often it's in the form of deep emotional release, crying, screaming, shouting, anger, all these emotions that arise and we don't know what the fuck is going on. And yet, here it is. Here it is. And when we see it knowingly and we welcome it and we hold space for it, and sometimes we need resources. We need others to help us. If we've had trauma, we need trauma-informed help because we can re-traumatize ourselves, right? So this liberation aspect is saying, okay, why is the unconscious, why can it be a problem for awakening? A problem? Well, because when we don't see the unconscious or welcome it, and we continue to go about the typical human activity of projecting, denying, repressing, avoiding, those inner children or exiled parts or that unconscious conditioning, when it's triggered by external conditions, as it was when it was formed, right? Maybe there was bullying, maybe there was trauma, maybe there was physical or sexual trauma, but whatever it is, that part will come up and assume the seat of your identity. Let me say that in a different way. The unconscious conditioning will become you. You will not be able to tell the difference between this unconscious part and who you are. And instead, what will happen is you will behave from the part as the part, blind to the fact that it's assumed your identity, and now you think you are that. And then you will act in the world in ways that seem antithetical to a path of increasing equanimity, decreasing suffering, increasing unity and love, increasing understanding of impermanence and emptiness, increasing understanding of the energetic nature of reality, all the other threads. They seem at odds with this way you're being a total cocksucker to people you care about most, say, or the guy who cut you off in traffic. So why might this be? Well, it was an adaptive response when you were young that was conditioned, or even deeper than that, and we'll talk about the deeper layers. And now it's coming up and assuming the seat of identity because you don't see it. You haven't liberated it to be what it is, to actually see it, to, in a sense, have a conversation with it and go, you're accepted, you had a role, you're important, I love you. This, whatever this inner child is. And that's a particular type of work. It can be internal family systems where you reparent this part from an adult awareness that can hold all the parts. That's what the parts are made of ultimately, right? And that requires working on the other threads too. But that said, by liberating this, allowing it to express, it no longer has to hijack identity. And then when it shows up, you can feel what it is. For me, it shows up like this. Let's say something happens where I notice that, let's say somebody who's doing something for me, because, like right now we're having our backyard remodeled, say, okay, something happens and it's not correct. It's not what you wanted. And what will happen is immediately I'll feel something in the body, almost like and by the way, I'm talking about it from the standpoint of someone who has made it conscious, so I can talk about it in this way. If I weren't conscious, I would just say, I got really fucking pissed, and it was so unfair because I'm paying people to do this thing and they're not getting it right. And I have to protect our interests, which means I have to get mad. I can't rest until this thing is resolved, and I need to fight. Okay, that's the unconscious. So what happens now when the unconscious thread is just showing up and you have no choice but to work on it, right? And some of this you've done intentionally, and some of it's if it just becomes like you can't stop it now. The trigger is there, so something happens in the yard, and you go, God, and you feel it in the body. You go, oh man, I am mad, and you start launching into thought, like all the things you have to say and do, and how unfair it is, and how they should have done this, and they should have done, that kind of thing. And now what happens is I go, ooh, I feel it. And then what I do is I work with somebody via Zoom who holds space for this kind of thing. And I'll sit with him and I'll go, okay, so today this thing happened, and I could feel in the body just this urgency. And then I get really angry, and it's about fairness, and and he will point me back and go, okay, so where are you feeling that in the body now? Do you feel it now? Can you think about this experience and then feel it? And I go, yeah, it's a tightness in the chest and in the arms. It's like this urgency. And then he'll further point in and go, okay, so focus on that sensation. Like if the sensation had a voice, what would it be saying? And that's where you just open yourself, and the unconscious will speak, and it will say, this is not okay. We're not safe. You need to do something to protect yourself and your family. And then the deeper you go down the onion hole, the onion skins, the layers, the more it reveals itself. And when you're working with someone else who's an expert at this, and you can do this yourself in meditation, you don't have to work with someone, but it certainly helps. You start to go, wait a minute. Oh, this memory's coming up when I was a child. This thing had happened where, these bullies showed up and they did this, and I was doing this, and it was just so wrong. It felt so wrong, and I felt totally powerless. And so then he goes, okay, so what's happening that made you feel like you were less powerless? We'll go, I would get angry, and then I would think about what I was going to do. So you have the inner child that was hurt and didn't feel safe, and then you have the response, which was an adaptive response, which is to project outwards, get angry, defend yourself, do all of this. And all of that was perfectly adaptive at that point. But now what's happening is things are triggering you, and it's that child is coming, projecting this thing outward, and it's taking over your whole identity. And you're not seeing it, you're not able to see it as clearly, but now you are, because you're having a conversation with this child. Like you're actually expressing appreciation for how hurt the child was, and how that adaptive behavior was very protective. But now it's okay, because the grown-up us can handle it without getting so angry, without letting it take over our entire sense of being. And we can still get something done. We can have a nice conversation from a place of centering and love that makes sure that things are done, but doesn't blame anyone, doesn't use shoulds and coulds and woulds, and instead just responds ably, right? But in order to do that, that inner child has to be allowed, welcomed, not resolved. There's nothing to resolve there. You see, it's different than, say, a trauma or some unresolved conflict. This is more, okay, this child has not been seen, heard, allowed, respected. It's an exiled part. And it will come up and take the seat of identity. And then you'll behave in ways that invoke suffering in you and in others. So that's just one example of working with unconscious material as maybe an internal family system dynamic, where you're looking at inner children and inner parts. They don't have to be children. They could be adult parts. And it's infinite. There's all kinds of stuff that will keep arising. That's the thing, is like, there's always stuff there. The thread itself completes when everything is welcome. When the unconscious is seen, when it arises, and it's welcomed. It's not resisted. It's not avoided. It's not denied. but it's still there. It's still conditioning every moment. But now the guardrails are off. The resistance is gone. The suffering drops immensely, and it's seen pretty quickly. And so you can actually be response able instead of just reactive all the time. Let's read a few comments real quick. Kay Jones says, is the unconscious located in the dorsal median nucleus, or DMN, or whatever that stands for? So here's the thing. As Pierce says, and I agree with this, I can't make any truth claims about anything. What we're talking about is pure experience. So I don't know where the unconscious is. I don't know what the unconscious is. I don't care, because it doesn't matter. What matters is experientially, it can show up like this conversation with an inner child. It shows up in these behaviors. So all I need to do is focus on my experience in this moment. And I don't have to make any truth claims about reality. I don't have to say reality is made of stuff. I don't have to say it's not made of stuff. I don't have to say it exists here or not here. That's all fine for fun. But for this work, it's totally irrelevant, because from the standpoint of the unconscious thread of awakening, all that matters is seeing everything, welcoming everything, liberating everything from that thread. From the perspective of the emptiness thread, there isn't even an unconscious. There isn't even thought. It's just all empty appearance, vibrating on a void. From the energetics thread standpoint, it's all just energy, just expressing itself from nothing. And from the divine love thread, it doesn't matter, because it's all one. It's all one. So there's not an ounce of separation between anything. So you can love your unconscious into infinity, and it's all just love. You see, so it's all experiential. It's all perspectival. It's all based on your perspective. So I don't know where the unconscious is, and it doesn't really matter to me, but it might be intellectually interesting. And who knows if there's truth or not truth? I don't even know anymore, but it doesn't matter for my own suffering or for this work. So it's a great question. So let's go into the onion a little more. What are the layers of unconscious? So you have your personal biographical story. Then you may have your pre-verbal, prenatal conditioning. Now for me, I accessed pre-verbal conditioning with psychedelics. Ayahuasca in particular was powerful. 5-MeO-DMT was powerful. And I'm going to talk about that in a show coming in October. What those allowed, and I've also experienced them in meditation and on meditation retreats. And what it is for me, pre-verbal trauma was, I was very young. I got sick when I was very young, I think. That's what it feels like. It was a GI thing, and literally felt like I was dying, but have no words for it, and was inconsolable in a sense. So the way that shows up is, I will often have this sort of way of dealing with the world where everything is kind of a threat. There's a level of like safety seeking, surrounding myself with people I trust, that kind of thing. And it comes from an existential fear that I think was pre-verbal, like probably 6 months old to a year. And with the psychedelics, I could feel in the body, in the gut, that same sense. And there was an ability to hold that child that was suffering with that as an adult and give it the comfort that it was looking for, but couldn't express. And so in a sense, it's a welcoming. It's not really a resolving. It's a saying, yes, you were a part of me. Yes, that was horrible. Here, I can love and hold you, and you're safe and you're okay. And I also understand what you went through, and it was bad. It was hard. And now I understand as an adult why there's this clenched fist in my gut that says no, It's clinging on. It's holding on for life. And how do you access that? You got to do the work. And it can be meditation. It can be awareness-based therapy. It can be somatic therapy. There's different therapies that point you into the body. You don't need psychedelics for this. It can be psychedelics with a guide, right? With intention set that this is the work I want to do. And I can just tell you this, it's excruciating. Because you have to feel all the stuff that you have not wanted to feel, that you've built an entire life on top of. And that's not a real life. It's a virtual life. It's an imaginal world you've built on top of this to not feel it. And all it wants, if you can personify it, and again, there's no truth claims here. It's not an entity, but it can be experienced as that. We're talking about experience. Sam Harris makes this distinction. He's talking about subjective experience. He's not talking about reality. You can't say shit about reality. That's what I think. And even that is a thought. So has no truth claim, no truth value. But having this sort of access to these deeper parts and allowing them to be felt is the work. And then what happens is you behave, and it's mysterious. It's fucking mysterious. Like, I am so much less reactive. As I say, it's fucking mysterious. I'm still me. I'm still me. I still love to curse. I still get enthusiastic about stuff. But now when shit goes wrong, I feel it in the body. I know what's happening. And there's something just natural that just relaxes. And I'm not the only one to notice this. People around me have noticed this. My wife told me the other day when there was a day in the last couple of weeks where everything was hitting the fan at once. And this normally would have thrown me into a tailspin of sort of grumpiness. I would have gotten into a mood. I would have been complaining constantly about would, should, and could, like this person should have that. Why? It's always me. That all of that. And instead, I responded to the situations, and I told her about at the end of the day, all the different things that sequenced up. And I was like, yeah, so that happened today. And she was like, The next day she was like, it's pretty remarkable. Like all those things that happened yesterday, normally you would have been in a foul mood for like a week. And instead it was like nothing happened. And I was like, well, there you go. I don't know what did that, but I think it's a sum total of the unconscious stuff. It's that unconscious thread. It's so crucial. And we're so afraid of it. So let's go deeper in the onion. Yeah, and see, NX says same with the reactivity lessening. It just happens. You don't even have to specifically do reactivity work, although that can help. Angela has great videos on this, on the fetters of reactivity with Kevin Shanafelt, I think. Shanelect? I don't remember his last name. Okay, the onion. Personal biographical, prenatal, pre-verbal trauma. We talked about that. Now go deeper. Ancestral intergenerational trauma that's passed on through our parents telling us about it, through the energetic interaction with your previous generations, through DNA itself, methylation and epigenetic phenomenon that pass on intergenerational experience to children. And this one is profound. Like you can find out truths about yourself by looking at your ancestors and seeing that you're the sum total of a group of humans over millennia that have survived incredible amounts of adversity and trauma. And that can be accessed in many different ways, but sometimes it shows up, for some people, it shows up as an external type of thing. So there can actually be the sense that there's an entity talking to you, like an ancestor. That's why this stuff is common in Eastern cultures, ancestor, and in Native American indigenous cultures. The idea that you can actually have a dialogue with your ancestors. And it's really just your unconscious talking to you, right? We're not making truth claims about the existence of entities. We're saying this is the experience that people have. And so sometimes shamanic rituals, certain psychedelics like ayahuasca can help you access that ancestral stuff. Sometimes talking to your relatives can do that, can help resolve. For me, these things have come up in different ways, right? And you realize, wow, I didn't know anything about this ancestral stuff. And the more I learn, the more I realize, oh, that's a part of me too. And by making it conscious, by actually knowing about it, by bringing it to light, that's all that needs to happen. There's nothing to resolve there really. And for me, it's more just, oh, now I see. And that can be powerful. So maybe that resolution, if there's something that feels unresolved, you can resolve it in a shamanic ritual by talking to an ancestor or a archetypal deity, whatever it is. It can show up for you experientially in many, many different ways. Maybe through prayer, if you're in the sort of more organized religion aspect of life, whatever it is. And even just talking to your parents, really knowing what they went through can be a powerful, and forgiving the stuff that you think you hold them responsible for, and forgiving yourself for stuff that you hold yourself responsible for, inflicting on them. Like, man, that's a powerful practice. And again, we're going deeper in the onion now, deeper into the unconscious, making it conscious, resolving what can be resolved, welcoming everything else, and liberating what feels unseen, repressed, or exiled. It's very powerful, very hard to do because we resist it. And as that resistance starts to collapse, it becomes spontaneous, it becomes natural that you just start to attune towards those dark spots that haven't been enlightened with awareness yet. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting in meditation and it will arise. Another good example that arises for me is sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety, like, oh, what is that? And now it's so spontaneous. I go, okay, something's not seen. And I'll go downstairs. I don't sit in bed because that's not how I can welcome these bits. It's associated with trying to fall asleep. And I don't want to confuse that with my bed. It's like good sleep hygiene. Like if you're not sleeping, get out of bed and see if you can relax, resolve what's going on. So I went downstairs and sit in my meditation chair and oh, there it is. There's a child, an inner part that doesn't feel safe because of X when it was a child. And it's being triggered by something that happened today. And now I can see it actually because there's a story playing. Ah, okay. Let's sit with this child and really feel what the child is feeling. Allow it to be there, fully accept it, listen to it. Say, stay as long as you need. Tell me what you need to tell me. I'm listening. Like as an adult would say to a child that it cares about, I'm here, I'm all ears. Tell me how your day was. And it will express, I'm scared, this is what's going on. And you just hold it. And you tell it, okay, you're safe now. I totally see how that could be scary. You're safe now. And then you go back upstairs and just conk right out. That's how it is for me now. That's how it's showing up for me. So again, the unconscious work has practical application. Get a better night's sleep. Forget about awakening. Let's go even deeper. And Jennifer Santos says circling, emotion circling work, very powerful because you get deep into the earliest emotional traumas and things like that. So circling is a powerful way to access the unconscious and things that arise. Like if you watch the documentary, The Work, the Inside Circle group is featured in that. They go into prisons. It is absolutely transformative. Absolutely. If you want to see the unconscious show up, watch that. You want to see repression, emotional repression? Look at anybody who's in prison. They have to repress the worst kind of traumas and injuries and just horrible shit, the things they've done in addition to all their childhood. So you go deeper, you get into the genetic ancestral stuff. Then you get into actually archetypal stuff like that is common to all humans, like the image of male and female or certain like maternal and paternal qualities and how they condition us. Then there's social conditioning that's also unconscious. Every time you get into your echo chamber on Fox News or on MSNBC, you're being conditioned unconsciously. You're being played actually by a social matrix that's telling you what to believe, telling you who's good and bad. And it causes so much suffering. You can feel it anytime you try to, politics come up at the dinner table on Thanksgiving. Everybody from their echo chambers is just weaponized against each other. That's unconscious social conditioning. Social media does it, algorithms do it. It's another kind of conditioning. And it's quite invisible until you notice it. And this week I'm interviewing one of the executive producers that was involved in the documentary, The Social Dilemma. And this is it. It's about how we're harming young people through this kind of particular conditioning. And then you get into mammalian conditioning, that we have certain mammalian instincts that are deep and you can actually feel into those. Actually, psilocybin as a psychedelic is interesting because it has a feeling, and this is just my own experience, it has a feeling of a kind of fungal or plant consciousness interacting and dancing with your own mammalian consciousness. And both are kind of highlighted. It's really interesting. So you feel that warm mammalian drive to love and this kind of very cool, detached, geometric plant vibe. And again, I'm not making truth claims about reality that plants are conscious or whatever. I'm just saying this is the experience that was had. And so it dives into our mammalian unconscious conditioning. And then you can get down to conditioning that goes right to the core of the Big Bang, and that there's more matter than antimatter. And, it gets crazy. But eventually what can happen is all of this conditioning can be welcomed, liberated, or resolved. And so then what happens is, this is important. It's not that the conditioning goes away. It doesn't. What is seen is that the conditioning has always and already been running the show like a clockwork, not mechanistically, but holistically and in a way that we can't ever understand as humans because we're limited in our ability to see that. But it's vibrating in interdependence with everything. Ultimately, in complete empty radiance, that's one. So there's your love thread and your emptiness thread, and it's pure energy, and it's all conditioned by the unconscious, and it's welcomed fully. So your reactivity arises and you see it, and it's let go. It's welcomed. The guardrails come off. You're no longer resisting, repressing, denying. And if that resistance, repression, denial happens, it's seen very quickly and allowed, and the work happens spontaneously. And then you live a life of freedom. What do I mean by that? If you're telling me that my unconscious conditions every single thing I do, how am I free? Imagine the freedom that comes when knowing that everything is exactly as it is. You don't need to resist or project or deny. You don't need to control. Everything will just happen as it does perfectly. And in the setting of knowing everything is love, everything is impermanent and insubstantial, and it's all just energy, and the four threads interweave into just, and then it's just like, I'm gonna live my goddamn life spontaneously, freely. I don't care about free will or no free will. I don't care about anything. I just care about shit. Look at this phone, or this lunch is amazing, or look at my daughter. Oh, some reactivity has arisen. Oh yeah, I can feel into that, and then going to do the next thing without all this obfuscation, all this distance, all this suffering, all this friction. And I think that's what's on offer, and that is work that's ongoing. And ultimately you realize you're not even doing it. It's all of it. It's the whole universe doing, it sounds vaguely sexual. It's the universe doing itself. Maybe it is vaguely sexual. Ryan Southworth talking to somebody else, saying just direct experience, don't label anything, just let it be. Kay Jones saying Jung was discredited. Jung was true but partial. All views are true but partial. So Jung's idea of the unconscious and the archetypal and all that, it can be experienced experientially. So in that sense, it's absolutely true. Is there a truth claim being made scientifically? I don't even know what that means anymore in that sense. Now, science is still science. So in the relative world of our social matrix and the way we do things, science is very good at predicting the next thing that will happen, helping us build devices, helping us do medicine to a degree. There's a lot of medicine that is not mechanistic. And that's what we miss. That's why medicine is shitty, reductionist. The things that work great, and the things that don't are just expensive and harmful. So we don't look at the whole biopsychosocial interdependency of how this is. And a lot of that is unconsciousness, the unconscious thread. How many people here work in healthcare and have seen patients come in that are anxious? You can tell instantly, energetically, you feel that they're just sitting on a powder keg of emotion, and it's showing up as physical stuff, and they're denying all of it. And all they want is tests, medicines, surgeries, but you're looking at them and feeling into it and going, this, meaning there's a biopsychosocial interdependency here. You're having physical symptoms because you're sitting on a repressed powder keg of something going on, whether it's stress or trauma or abuse at home or food insecurity, like all the other shit that happens. And it's showing up as, whatever, whether it's chest pain, migraines, irritable bowel syndrome. And I'm not saying those things don't have biological roots too. I said they're biopsychosocial. It's all of it together. But we just look at the biological and we want to reduce it to that. Ashley says, it's hard to measure something that can't easily be found. Right. So why try? Why try to measure the unconscious? No, just experience. Just open to what is happening in your experience. And by the way, we're very suggestible as humans. I mean, part of that social conditioning is what others tell you. So, oh, Zubin told me, my unconscious will show up this way. No, actually I didn't. I said, feel into your own experience. It has the possibility to show up in all these different ways, just as examples. But how yours shows up could be totally different than how anybody else's has ever shown up in the history of anything. And that's the beauty of like being a unique human. Let's see here. Kay says, oh, we're talking about more eugenics and all that nonsense. I'm going to ignore that because I don't know shit about that. And Kate also says, since I've been doing transcendental meditation for a long time, 13 to 14 years, I see the coolest things every time I meditate. I actually use this to create my paintings as an artist. So meditation, again, is, in a sense, it's quieting the conscious mind so the unconscious can display itself. When I started meditating years ago, and I took it very seriously, I was doing an hour or 2 hours a day of just breath, like focused meditation, very Vipassana type meditation. What would happen is these unconscious things would arise, insights, memories, connections, and I would get all excited and I'd write them down. And it was really just the unconscious just showing up by quieting that top layer of the onion. The deeper layers would bubble up. And so it's a powerful practice. We just have to be careful that sometimes we do get attached to certain experiences, which is fine, but then we start to sort of crave those experiences or chase after them and then kind of repress other stuff. And in a sense, we may get stuck somewhere, which is also fine, right? If you're okay and you're not suffering and everything's hunky-dory, why worry about it, right? But if you're feeling like, I'm feeling a little stuck, sometimes we can get attached to our practice too. That certainly happened to me. That's why I mention it. Oh, no need to apologize, Kay. I love your comments. Evan says, chest pain, migraine, bowels, you just named my body. There we go, right? We're just sitting on this. I'm the same. I'm just neurotic as fuck because I've been just repressing all this stuff. And now as it unwinds, the crazy thing is the body it keeps the score, right? We have heard about that book. And my friend Simon Brown in the UK talks about this. The body just encodes these traumas and these things. And so as we dive in, the body starts to open in ways that surprise us. And it may be painful. It may be physically painful. We may find all kinds of stuff shows up, inflammation, different things like that. That's all part of it. And again, to be fully dived into it may be unpleasant. For me, what I've noticed is suddenly I'm doing yoga with my wife every night, watching Yoga with Adriene on YouTube. She's fantastic, by the way. What I love about her is she's just like so down to earth, and the stuff is like mindful of injury and things like that. Because, back problems, neck problems, those kind of things. She's very careful. And everything just starts to embody, and the body feels much more fluid and energetically open. And the more this other work is done, it's all kind of interwoven, interdependent, very, very beautiful. Risa says that's the value in retreat. So meditation retreat, for me at least, there's enough a time to really quiet the mind. Yes, I cannot emphasize enough, if you feel called to this, how powerful retreat is. Because when the top layer of mind is calmed down and there's a group collective samadhi or jariki, these are different Eastern terms for concentration. And it's not concentration the way you think of, I'm focused on an object. It's a kind of unification of the mind where the mind just starts to, the little sub-minds, sub-parts of us all align and go, okay, we're here to just be present with whatever is. And the group energy actually reinforces that socially. So it becomes this incredible stillness. And every retreat for me has been a revelation in a different way. One retreat may open up the thread of emptiness. Another may open up the thread of divine oneness, non-separation love. Another thread may open up maybe the energetic thread, like Kundalini energy shooting through the body and everything feeling energetic and connected. And the other may be the unconscious, like, oh my God, you spend the whole retreat crying and wailing in the shower and so on, and just wondering what it is, and then feeling all this, oh my God, when I was a kid, this or that or this, and it just shows up. And retreat is a wonderful vehicle for that. Now, knowing that sometimes you need support, because if you've had a lot of trauma, retreat can re-traumatize, because you may not be supported. But most retreats that are good, there'll be someone there who can help you if you're having a spiritual emergency, which this can arise. It does arise. There's some, like Goenka Vipassana retreats where it's 10 days of just silence and this very strict thing, and people lose their shit. It's been written about, actually. You can have an actual spiritual emergency where you can have almost like a psychotic break because you're flooded with the unconscious. So the unconscious thread, unmitigated, without support, it can flood in, and you just, the mind doesn't know what to do, and it fractures. And there's support for that. There's support for that. Let's see. Boy, we've gone for a while now. We may want to wrap up, but God, there's so many great comments going back here. And again, a reminder, after the video is over, please leave a comment. Please leave your story kind of thoughtfully written out. I read all those comments, and it helps other people because people actually read these comments. And it also helps the algorithm too. So if you want this video to reach other people, the more engagement it gets, hit like, share, subscribe, turn your notifications on. It just helps get that message out. So I feel like obliged now to make that pitch. Not that I care about influence, because I no longer give a shit. It's more that if we're going to do it and it's going to connect with people, it's good if people see it. That's all. And this stuff that I talk about, most people don't want to watch. It's not like I'm talking about COVID or medical stuff or something like that, or doing some comedy shit. It's much less, it's more the people that are really called to it. So to get it in front of those people, juice the algorithm, because then the algorithm's almost supernatural. It knows what you ought to see at the right time, in a sense. Colum says, hey, it's Colum from London. Oh, yes. Saw you at Angelo's retreat. Nice to see you at the Art of Living last year. See, these retreats are great. I can't make it this year just because the scheduling conflicts with family stuff. But that is a great retreat. It's still open, I think, Art of Living. You can go to artofliving.com or Angelo's website, simplyalwaysawake.com, and sign up there. It's in North Carolina in the hills up in Boone. One of my favorite things is that retreat. It's unbelievable. Hey, DVD Mon says, he's a supporter, by the way, Supporter Tribe, another great place to be if you care about this stuff. I find I can get closer to that quieting mind outside of retreat by removing distractions, but it's very difficult to do this for any extended period. Talking about not watching, listening, reading. Yeah, it is hard. And what I've done now, Levy, is I've realized it doesn't even have to happen. If you have a meditative practice where you can sit for a certain period of time each day, that's enough focus and enough stilling. And then through the rest of the day, just allow what arises to arise. Don't reject distraction. Maybe just allow it. Go, oh yeah, distraction. And then all of life becomes retreat. All of life becomes a meditation. It's just life living itself at that point. And that can be, I don't know that that's necessarily the best way to start a practice, because we're so conditioned and habitually in mind that we won't see it. So using the meditation, using the retreat as an insight mechanism to realize, oh, I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my mind. It's just, everything is just happening. Then when distraction happens, you can see it as distraction and it's totally fine. I'm distracted right now. Cool. I'm up in my head. Okay. And sometimes that'll spontaneously redirect your attention into the body. That may be all it takes. Just drop attention into the body sense and you recenter in exactly what's happening, which is your senses, coming back to your senses. That's where that term really comes from. It's going from up in here in this imaginal world to coming into your senses, like sights, sounds, sensations in the body. Thoughts floating by are just a sixth sensation. Taste and smell, just all energetic. That's it. And that can be enough. Kat says, have you ever participated in a Jesuit retreat? Safe journey. Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. And the thing is, you can find a retreat that jibes with whatever your conditioned beliefs are. So if you're, say, a Christian or Catholic, a Jesuit retreat might be really powerful. If you're atheist or agnostic, a secular Vipassana type retreat might be good. If you're a Buddhist, well, obviously there's Buddhist retreats. If you're a Hindu or a Vedantic Hindu, there's all kinds of Advaita type retreats. And sometimes just going to church or going to a religious function can be a type of retreat. Prayer can be a practice, yoga, meditation, walking in nature, doing some craft or art that you love, writing poetry, writing music, playing music, practicing medicine. All of it. Catalin says, if you have to cry or laugh at retreat, should you leave the room? This is a common thing that comes up at silent retreats. Like, What if I have to cry or I start laughing and everybody's supposed to be silent? You're supposed to respect the silence. Well, people will get it. What often happens if tears arise during retreat, you can sob silently in retreat and it's totally fine. And actually people will pick up that energy and it will often release them. Like I've been next to people who are crying in retreat and it opens up the emotion body in me and I start to cry. And it's okay. It's actually beautiful. It's actually perfect. Laughter is the same thing. This can sometimes get on people's nerves if they're having a difficult time in retreat and someone just starts laughing spontaneously. But the spontaneous laughter of realization is infectious. It is, look, you can access it in any moment, okay? So if you drop your attention right now, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm talking to myself right now. If you drop attention into the body, and then for me, it's a simple inquiry, like, who's doing this? Who am I? What is this? And I look and experience. There it is. It's the unfinding of any center, of any self, and the in-seeing of the nature of the pure potentiality that is all of this. That the laughter just comes because it's so funny that we could think otherwise. And it's also just hilarious that the whole thing has been this way all the time and we look so hard and it's right in front of our face. So why would you repress that in retreat? Let it go. Let it express. Yeah. And you can step out. You can step out of the room. That does happen. That's okay. Kenny says, as soon as you asked the question, who's doing this, I was laughing. Right? Who's doing this? Try to find it. Just try to find who's doing this in your experience. I mean, this actually is the perfect way to tie this whole thing in a nice bow. We talk about the unconscious. We talk about the unconscious thread. A great inquiry is related to this that will tie all the threads together is who is doing this? So who's doing the unconscious? Who's doing the next thing that I do? Oh, I made a decision to move my hand. Did you? And the lack of findability of the doer is fucking hilarious because all our lives we thought we were doing the thing. And society will recondition this. Oh, you need to be responsible for your actions. That's all wonderful societal bullshit. But the truth is, this shit is going on in a total mystery. And it's the mystery itself that's doing this. But even that is just this ape mouth flapping its gums trying to say words about something that's so not that it's hilarious. It really is. But see, what about the suffering and the children? Hilarious, ultimately. And tragic. And terrible. And can't say a word. All the questions fall away. The questions of why is there suffering? The questions of is there a God? The questions of who's doing this are just... And the unconscious rolls on. An orchestration orchestrating itself perfectly for no one. And so when you show up here to experience it all, what a fucking miracle. hilarious and perfect and terrible and awful and annoying and just this. Couldn't be otherwise, shouldn't be otherwise, wouldn't be otherwise. Perfect. That's it. One taste, Katie. All right. I love you guys so much. This was a lot of fun for me, and it helps. Honestly, I mean, the real motivation for why I do these live shows is it's a practice for me. So this is a meditation for me because I don't know where these words come from. You know, I read some stuff and think beforehand, like, maybe I want to talk about this today. And then whatever shows up, and it surprises me. And there are points where I'm talking where I'm like, I'm off the rails. I don't even know what I was talking about. And then something will bubble up and be like, oh yeah, it was this. We're going into this. We're talking about this. It's a miracle. It's a miracle orchestrated by the entire universe fully exerting itself right now. And what a practice to be able to do it with others who are tuned in to this. I'm really grateful. Really, really, really grateful. All right. I love you guys. And we're out. Remember, comment, share the video, hit like, smash that notification bell. And I'll see you guys maybe next week. And supporters, we'll try to do a Zoom meeting soon, maybe in the next week or so. All right. Love you. Peace.